we'll be learning about properties of addition and multiplication. Let's start with the commutative property. For addition, this tells us you can add numbers in any order and get the same sum. For example, x plus y is equivalent to y plus x. The commutative property works for multiplication as well. You can also multiply numbers in any order and get the same product. For example, a times b is equivalent to b times a. Both expressions will have the same value. Now let's take a look at the associative property. For addition, this tells us we can regroup the addends with parentheses and get the same sum. Let's look at this expression, a plus b plus c. Notice the parentheses have b and c grouped together. I can move the parentheses to group a and b instead, like this. These expressions are equal. This property also applies to multiplication. You can regroup the factors with parentheses and get the same product. Here, notice how the x and y are grouped together. We can change it so that the y is instead grouped with the z and still get the same result. Next up, we have the identity property. The identity property allows a number to keep its original identity. For addition, that means adding 0. For example, when 0 is added to a, it is still a. It kept its original identity. For multiplication, let's think. What number can we multiply by that allows the value to stay the same? That's right, 1. So x times 1 equals x. Now we have the zero property of multiplication. This property only applies to multiplication, not addition. It tells us that multiplying by 0 always gives you 0. So 0 times m must be 0, just like 5 times 0 equals 0. The last property we'll talk about is the distributive property of multiplication. This tells us we can multiply by a sum by multiplying each addend separately. That means if I have something like a times the quantity of b plus c, I can first multiply a by b, then add that to a times c. This also works if we have b plus c times a. The product is exactly the same. Let's look at some examples and see if we can spot the property being used. Which equation shows the commutative property of multiplication? The commutative property allows us to multiply values in any order and still get the same product. T times u equals u times t shows us the same variables being multiplied in a different order. That's the commutative property. Next up, we're looking for which equation shows the identity property of addition. Remember, the identity property allows a value to keep its original identity. With addition, that's by adding 0. So t equals 0 plus t shows the identity property of addition. Here's another example. Which property of multiplication is shown? So what are we seeing here? We have 3 variables being multiplied. On one side of the equal sign, the k is grouped with the m in parentheses. On the other side, the k is grouped with the j. What property allows us to regroup factors in parentheses and still get the same product? That's right, the associative property. Let's take a look at a different type of example. Here we'll determine which property we will use to find the value of w that makes this equation true. Well, if I apply the commutative property, that would tell us that 68 plus 28 is the same as 28 plus 68, which means w equals 28. One more example. Here we're again trying to find the value of the variable that makes the equation true. This one's a bit tricky, but let's take a look at the numbers. U and 9 are both multiplied by 17 on the left, but I only see one 17 on the right. So we applied the distributive property. We can see now that the 17 gets multiplied by the 40, and then 17 gets multiplied by 9. That allows us to see that both sides are equal, which means u equals 40. Great job identifying properties and applying them to find values of variables. Keep up the good work!